Hi guys, in this video we're going to be adding a particle system to essentially create some interesting effects when we collide with stuff. For starters, we're going to try and find the player token collision, and then based on that collision we're going to play a simple particle effect. First of all, what we're going to do is create a 2D object and call it sprite, or actually no, call it particle sprite. We're going to turn it into a prefab in a second. We already covered prefabs and game objects and instantiations and stuff a while ago, so you should be familiar with these things. Sprite renderer is not needed. We're going to create a particle system. So if you add a component and if you type particle, the very first thing you're going to see is particle system. Once you've added that system, you're going to end up with something like this, and you can customize a lot of interesting things. For example, duration of the particle effect, let's shorten it to 1 second, and then all these various configurations allow you to change the emitter, which is the thing that's used in many engines to create particle effects. These emitters simply emit particles over time, and based on configurations you're going to get different effects. Let's change start lifetime to also 1, because I want to create a short animation when we collide with a token, with a coin, and that's it really. In emission, well, we don't need to change anything in here. Shape looks fine. If you just read the documentation, it will tell you what each of these things does. So this thing called shape changes the direction and how particles are emitted. Let's change size over lifetime. So we're going to start small and then they're going to grow. And you can actually change the curve as well. But we're going to talk about curves, interpolations at some later point. What we want is to change these software rendered shapes into something like a texture. So if we go to texture sheet animation, check that so it's turned on. In the mode setting, I guess, change it to sprites. And then you can select a sprite from there. There are a bunch of sprites that we currently have, so let's just select the first one, asteroid, first doable one, I guess. And then if you want to actually change the visuals of that, we're going to go to renderer, and then the material should be set to sprites default, which is at the very end. And then you'll be able to see your asteroids or whatever it is that you selected. There are various interesting things you can select over here, but we're going to keep it simple for now. If you want a little bit more randomness, you can introduce noise. You can, because instead of uniform random, this is going to use the noise function to drive the movement. You can change the strength to maybe 0.2, so it's slower. Maybe change rotation over lifetime, so it rotates. Anyway, just play around with these. This is not exact science. Particle systems are there to create effects, and you'll need to change it as needed to fit your game. As for everything else, I think that's fine, at least for now. So particle sprite is a game object rather than a prefab. So we're going to turn into prefab so we can spawn as many as we need. We have our own directory called z_prefabs, which is what we used for creating a shield prefab a while ago. So let's drag particle sprite over there, get rid of the game object because we don't need it anymore. We have our prefab now. And don't forget to turn off looping, because we don't want a looping animation. We just want an animation, a one-off animation. So my idea is that if we create this game object, then it should play the animation once, and then that's it. So let's test that theory. But before we can do that, though, we need to figure out where the collision happens. I think it's in token instance. I've been already looking at that, so it should be open somewhere here. If you click on token instance in the asset explorer type thing, it will basically show you where the file is. So double click on that. And this is what we have. On trigger enter is what the script is using to figure out when we collide with a player. And if the thing that we collided with is actually the player, then we're going to call on player enter, which in turn calls this thing. And the thing that we want to use is this event called player token collision. So if you go into that, control click, you'll find this event, and the only thing being called at the moment is just the audio. So what we want to do is grab a prefab, and I'm thinking we can use one of these things to transfer the prefab, maybe that one. And then spawn the prefab here, spawn particles. Let's try that. Token instance is already, well, we already have it open, right? Yeah. Let's add a public field called game object, and that is going to store our prefab. So particle sprite, did we call it? Prefab. And this is going to be selected from the Unity editor. So go back to Unity, find your prefab. Actually, wait a second. Tokens are not prefabs. So that's not going to be great. That's fine. We'll just add it to these 5 things, and then you can figure out from there how to use these prefabs. Yeah, so we have to add it directly to each of these things. If you don't want to do that, you could grab prefab from the player controller, add it here. There's only one player, so you don't want to, if you don't want to set it to these 5 things, and then these all tokens are actually not prefab instantiated, so these are actual game objects, in which case you'll need to set it manually to each one of those if you needed it. But don't do that, because that's not the way to go. What you ultimately want is to turn this into a prefab and then go from there. But for now, for test purposes, that should be sufficient. So assets, particle sprite, yep, particle sprite, and then all these, I'm just going to select that. I guess we could start just with 1, because we don't know if this is going to work or not. Yeah, that's fine. I've done 3. 3 is good enough for testing purposes. Now that these things, now that these tokens know this prefab, we're able to instantiate it, right? Player token collision, token prefab, and then just call instantiate. And where does it live? Game object instantiate. Now we also want to set the position of that, right? So what we get back is a game object, which is particle sprite. There's probably an overload to instantiate with a new vector or something. but that's fine. We're going to do it the clearer way. Create an object, and then we're going to set its position to the position of the token, right? Transform position, so that when we destroy the token, we're playing the particle effect animation at the point where the token was. And then I guess ultimately we just need to get rid of particle sprite at some point. Okay, let's try that and see if this works. These are a bit too big, but the idea works. So when we collect it, we have this animation. We probably want to tweak it a little bit so that it's not too big and it kind of is more focused, concentrated at a point that you're collecting this thing from. But that's good enough for us. What else can we do? I was thinking we could add some custom textures as well. So we got our brick here, which is a custom texture that we added last time. I've got a bunch of particle-based sprites. So these are like textures that are really good for particles. I'm going to give you the link in the description. I think this is kenny.nl is where I got this from. And that site's got quite a lot of 2D and 3D assets. Most of them are for free, and their license is permissive, whether you want to use it in your own project or for educational purposes. So these are really great, and do check them out. But what we're going to do is try and use one of these and see what kind of effects we can produce. So at this point, we're just experimenting. The main part we've completed. So let's find our prefab particle sprites. Let's go to particle system. Where's the render? There we go. Texture sheet animation. Let's set it to something different, like circle 01, and then see what the result is. Can we turn this thing on and then maybe add just one so we can see what's happening? So the color of the background you can see is like blackish. What we want is additive blending, which I think is in the materials somewhere. Yeah, that's not too bad. Can we get more particles? Emission rate over time 100. And then start color. Yeah, something like that looks really nice. Speed. How do I reduce speed? Where's start speed? There we go. Let's try that. Or even 0.2. That's a nice looking effect. And because of your additive blending, you get these almost like composite effects. If you're thinking about like anything to do with fire effects, you're going to use additive blending, which is really nice. No, did not mean to do that. How do I go back? yeah, anything else is not going to look great. Additive is what you want, because color black is represented as 0, and then as the more stuff that you add on top of it, it's going to add up to something like white, because the more colors you add, the RGB value of that color is going to increase, and the resulting effect is going to look brighter. Okay, let's get rid of that. Let's remove loops, get rid of this one, and then let's go back to our prefab. Did keep the settings. Let's change the setting to additive. And what was the start color? Something like that. Let's go with that. Oh, it's looping now because I turned it off only for the game object, not the prefab. But anyway, you get the idea of how you can manipulate various things. You probably want, so if you want additive, you typically want things like clustered and not moving away, because then you get the whole effect from the additive blending. Okay, on that note, thanks for watching, and next time we'll be doing something slightly different. Maybe make a small game out of this. See you next time.